Ever feel like your brain could really use an upgrade? Like maybe you need to install the latest software patch for that anxiety that just keeps hanging around, or you just really need to boost those focus settings.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. Neurotherapy. And listen, you're really interested in how it can help with addiction, so we're definitely going to make sure we explore that.
It's such a fascinating field, especially now. We're really starting to understand how flexible the brain really is.
Right.
And you're right, this isn't about like some crazy sci-fi brain transplant. It's about retraining those electrical impulses, those brain waves, the things that are always firing in the background.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We're not plugging into the matrix here, are we?
No,
Yeah.
definitely not.
Good to know. But so how does this actually work? I'm picturing like electrodes and stuff. Is it like those old sci-fi movies where someone's strapped down to a table?
Oh, no, nothing quite that dramatic. Imagine this. You're sitting in a super comfy chair. Maybe you're playing a game, maybe watching a nature documentary, just totally vibing. And you've got some sensors, on your scalp. They're kind of like a futuristic headband.
I like it.
And they're just picking up on your brain's electrical activity.
So like a detective, kind of just listening in on my brainwaves, seeing what's going on. What are they listening for?
Exactly. Exactly. They're looking for patterns or maybe areas where things might be a bit, I don't know, out of whack.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you've been struggling with addiction, your brain might be a little too used to those reward signals that get triggered by certain substances.
Oh, so that's where the retraining comes in. So you're basically trying to teach the brain to find satisfaction, but in like healthier ways.
Exactly. Yeah. And to dig a little deeper into that, let's take a closer look at how addiction actually plays into all of this.
Yeah.
So think of your brain's reward system as this delicate balance, right?
Yeah.
And when it's working like it should, you're feeling motivated. You feel rewarded by things like social connection, like, achieving your goals, or even just like enjoying a delicious meal, those basic things.
Yeah.
But with addiction, that balance, it kind of gets thrown off. It's like the brain gets fixated on that one reward pathway.
The one triggered by the substance.
Yes, exactly.
Got it.
The brain starts to put that instant gratification from that substance above all of those other naturally rewarding activities. And that's where neurotherapy comes in. It steps in to help kind of nudge the brain back toward a healthier place, a healthier equilibrium.
So are we like hitting the reset button on those reward pathways?
Yeah, kinda.
But how do you actually like teach the brain to want something different, to crave something different?
Well, it's not so much about completely erasing those old pathways.
Right.
It's more about strengthening those new ones.
Okay.
Think of it kind of like physical therapy, but for your brain.
Okay.
So let's say you've been relying on a crutch for a while.
Right.
Your muscles are probably going to get a little weak, right?
Yeah.
Neurotherapy, it's like it helps those muscles get stronger.
I like it.
And in this case, you're talking about the muscles of self-control and, finding pleasure in healthier, more positive activities.
Okay, that makes sense. So instead of reaching for that drink or that drug,
Yeah.
you're basically helping the brain find satisfaction, but in things like going for a run or connecting with people you love or, maybe pursuing a creative outlet, things like that.
Yeah, you got it.
Wow.
And what's really interesting is how neurotherapy actually reinforces those positive choices.
Right.
So remember those sensors that are picking up on your brain waves?
Yeah.
Okay, let's say, for example, your brain, it starts like veering off, like towards that old craving pathway, right? Neurotherapy can actually detect that shift and provide like immediate feedback, almost like a gentle nudge, to steer you back towards a healthier state of mind.
So it's almost like those sensors are saying, hey, brain, wrong turn. Let's get back on track here.
Yes, I love that. That's a great way to visualize it. And here's where I think it gets really cool. Neurotherapy, it often uses visual and auditory rewards to reinforce those good brainwave patterns, the ones you want.
Interesting.
So let's say you're watching a screen during your session and your brainwaves, they start showing that healthy rhythm.
Okay.
The screen might brighten up or maybe you'll hear a really pleasant sound.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a virtual high five for all your progress.
I love that.
Right. And so your brain will start associating those really positive reinforcements with the desired brainwave patterns, which over time will make those healthier patterns feel more rewarding.
So it's kind of like, when you're training a dog with treats, but instead of the treats, it's like those good vibes in your brain.
Exactly.
That's amazing. I have to say, this is blowing my mind. A few years ago, I thought meditation was like the absolute cutting edge of brain training, but this is next level.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a rapidly evolving field.
Right.
And the more we understand about neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to change and adapt, the more potential we see for neurotherapy to address so many things. You're talking about addiction, there's anxiety, and so much more beyond that.
You mentioned anxiety. Now, our listeners really interested in addiction, but is there a link between how neurotherapy works for both of those things?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember when we were talking about how with addiction, your brain's reward system, it kind of gets out of whack?
Yeah.
Well, anxiety in a way can also be a type of imbalance.
Okay.
But instead of seeking those rewards, the brain kind of gets stuck in this loop of fight or flight responses.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like when I'm about to give a presentation and my heart starts racing, my palms get all sweaty.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In those situations, your amygdala, which is your brain's fear center, is essentially kind of taking over, hijacking your prefrontal cortex.
Right.
Which, if you remember, is the part of the brain that's all about rational thought and decision-making.
Right. So it's like the amygdala is like slamming that panic button.
Exactly.
And your prefrontal cortex is over there. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. We got this. We don't need to panic.
Yeah.
Like trying to regain control.
Precisely. And that's where neurotherapy can help. It can actually strengthen your prefrontal cortex's control over the amygdala, allowing for a more balanced response. It's like giving your brain the tools to hit the brakes on that, like, runaway anxiety train.
Okay, that makes sense. So whether it's rewiring those reward pathways that we were talking about with addiction, or it's giving your brain the tools to manage anxiety, it seems like at its core, neurotherapy is really about restoring a sense of balance, a sense of control.
You've got it. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so with all this talk of like retraining brainwaves and rewiring these neural pathways, I have to ask, is there any risk of, I don't know, messing things up? Is it possible to rewire your brain, but like in a way that's not beneficial?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. And I totally get why you'd ask that. It's understandable to wonder about, like, what are the downsides here?
Yeah, exactly.
But honestly, neurotherapy, when it's done correctly, when it's done by a qualified practitioner, is incredibly safe.
Okay, good. So no risk of accidentally turning into a supervillain.
No, I think you're safe from that. But really remember, neurotherapy, it's not about forcing your brain into doing something that's unnatural. It's about working with your brain's natural plasticity, its ability to change and adapt. It's about guiding it towards those healthier patterns.
Right.
Think of it like this. You can't force a plant to grow in a certain direction.
Right.
But you can give it the right conditions, right? Like
Yeah.
sunlight and water and nutrients to help it thrive.
Right. So it's much more like a gentle guidance than a complete, rewiring.
Yes, exactly. It's all about working with your brain's natural ability to heal and grow.
That's really good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to ask, because with any kind of therapy, there are often side effects.
Right.
So what about neurotherapy? Are we talking about things like brain fog or headaches, or are there other things?
That's a great question. Most people will experience very few, if any, side effects.
Okay, that's good.
It really is considered a very safe and non-invasive approach.
That's great.
But having said that, some people, they might experience some mild and temporary side effects. And, you mentioned a couple of them. Headaches, maybe some fatigue, or even a little bit of like increased anxiety during or after a session.
So kind of like those post-workout aches, but for your brain.
Yeah, I like that. You could totally say that. It's usually just a sign that your brain is working hard and adapting.
Gotcha.
And those side effects, they usually go away really quickly. But I think what's super important to remember is that everyone's brain is totally unique.
Right.
So what works amazingly for one person might not be the best fit for someone else. And that's why it's so important to talk to a qualified healthcare professional. They can really help determine if neurotherapy is the right choice for you. And, they can address any concerns that you might have.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. It's more like you need to find like a tailored suit for your brain.
I love that analogy. You're exactly right. Just like a tailor will take your measurements to make sure that the clothes fit you perfectly, a good neurotherapy practitioner will assess your individual needs and tailor the treatment so it works for you. And, just like a tailored suit, it might take a few fittings to get it just right.
Speaking of fittings, I have to admit, like when I was diving into the research for this episode, I was a little overwhelmed by how many different types of neurotherapy there are.
Yeah.
It was like I walked into an ice cream shop, but there were like a million flavors. And I was just like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I get it. There are a lot.
It can feel very intimidating.
There are definitely a bunch of different approaches, and they each have their own, like, strengths. They have their own areas of focus. But don't worry, it's not as complicated as it might seem when you first start looking into it.
Okay, good. So let's break it down a little bit. What are some of the key types of neurotherapy that our listeners should know about, especially if they're dealing with addiction?
Yeah, great question. So we have to start with, like, the most common type, and that's frequency power neurotherapy.
Okay.
Think of it as like the vanilla ice cream of neurotherapy.
Okay.
It's super versatile, and it's a really great starting point for a lot of people. And basically how it works is they place sensors on your scalp. And those sensors monitor your brainwave frequencies. And these different frequencies, they're associated with different mental states.
Mm-hmm.
So, if your brain's kind of stuck, like playing that broken record of anxious thoughts,
Right.
this type of neurotherapy can kind of help shift it to a more like chilled out track.
Okay, so like we're fine-tuning the radio dial of your brain to kind of pick up a different
Yeah.
frequency.
Exactly. Perfect analogy. Now, for something a little more targeted, let's talk about HEG neurofeedback.
HEG, okay, that one sounds intriguing. What's HEG all about?
All right, so HEG stands for hemoencephalography.
Okay.
And while a lot of types of neurotherapy focus on directly measuring brainwave activity, HEG is a little different.
Okay.
It actually measures blood flow in your brain,
Interesting.
specifically in the prefrontal cortex.
And that's the command center.
Right. Exactly. The command center for decision-making, for emotional regulation, for paying attention, all that good stuff.
So it's almost like you're giving your brain a workout
Yes.
by increasing the blood flow to those really key areas.
Exactly.
Does that mean I have to like strap on a sweatband and do mental jumping jacks?
Not quite, but you're on the right track. It's based on the idea that when there's more blood flow to these important areas of your brain, it's like they have more of what they need to really function at their best.
Okay.
Because that increased blood flow, it carries oxygen and nutrients, which are like essential for your brain to do its thing.
Right. So if someone's struggling with addiction and their prefrontal cortex isn't really firing on all cylinders,
Yeah.
HEG could kind of give it a boost.
Yeah, exactly. And remember how we were talking about how important the prefrontal cortex is for regulating those impulses and making those healthier choices?
Right.
Well, HEG, it can be really helpful in strengthening those executive functions.
Okay.
So it can really give someone a better chance of resisting those addictive urges.
I can see why you said it's like giving your brain a workout.
Right.
This is fascinating. It's like we're finally starting to figure out the instruction manual for our brains.
Yeah.
It's like we've gone from those old brain gym exercises to actually having these finely calibrated tools to like really work with.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're really just getting started. I think as researchers and clinicians keep looking into neurotherapy, we're going to see even more targeted, even more effective approaches. Like, just imagine what we'll be able to do in the future.
Yeah, that's what's so exciting. Like, what if someday we could use this not just for, addiction or anxiety, but for, I don't know, enhancing creativity.
Yeah.
Or like helping people's memories or even like boosting empathy.
Oh, I know. The possibilities really are amazing. But I do think, even though neurotherapy has incredible potential, we have to remember, it's not magic.
Right.
It's not like you can just wear a headset and poof, all your problems disappear overnight.
Yeah, it's not like one of those infomercials like, learn French in your sleep.
Exactly. You got it. Neurotherapy takes work.
Yeah.
It takes commitment, from the person who wants the treatment and from the practitioner, too.
Right.
It really is a team effort.
Makes sense.
It's a process of getting to know your own brain, understanding those things that trigger you, and then practicing healthier patterns over time.
Okay, so more like a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. Yeah. I'd say it's more like learning a new skill.
Right.
Like, when you want to learn an instrument or a new language, it takes time, and you need to be patient with yourself, and you just have to practice if you want to get good at it.
And you probably want a good teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is where a qualified neurotherapy practitioner really comes in.
Yes, exactly. It's so important to find a practitioner who knows what they're doing, who has experience, who's compassionate. And you want to find someone who really gets you, who understands what you want to achieve, what your goals are, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
And that's so important for the journey, for it to be successful.
Totally. So for our listener who's out there and they're intrigued by all of this, they want to learn more, what would be that first step? What should they do?
That's great. I would say the best thing to do is just start doing your research. Look around, see who are the qualified people in your area. Check out what other people have said about them, read reviews, and, maybe even schedule like a quick chat, just a consultation.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, just to get to know them, see what their approach is like, learn more about their experience.
Good advice.
And don't be afraid to speak up. Ask all the questions you can think of. This is your brain we're talking about.
That's such an important reminder. And while you're doing that research, it's not a bad idea to kind of think about what you want to get out of this too. Like, what is it about your brain or about your life that you think could really benefit from a little fine-tuning?
I love that. That's so good because it makes you really think about yourself. It gives you the power to be in the driver's seat of your own, healing, your own growth. And I think that's really cool. This isn't just about fixing what's quote unquote broken. It's about seeing how amazing your brain is. It's about reaching your full potential.
Well said. Well, to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a really good understanding of neurotherapy, what it is, how it all works, and especially we hope you understand how much potential it has to help people, especially with addiction and with so many other things too. Just remember, the more you know, the more power you have, especially when it comes to your own mind. So keep asking questions, keep exploring all of this, and keep those brain waves buzzing.